Yo, what's going on, guys? Episode 18 of the PokeTalk podcast. Recording pretty late this time around. Don't know how long we'll go, but yeah, what's going on? You going to be able to stay awake over there?
We'll see. I usually go to bed by about 11:30 midnight, but I'm fully caffeinated. Well, I'm trying to be the best I can be. I think I've had like almost 600 milligrams of caffeine a day or something like that. So.
Say, I'm usually in bed by 10 o'clock nowadays, and it's already 10 right now. So, But yeah, we got a good episode for you. It's older, rarer, minter. Is it always better? You know, I'm sure you've heard the saying many times if you've been in the hobby, especially like 4 years or so. Older, rare, minter, better is something that gets tossed around almost like a meme. I think S.M. Pratt, made it kind of a famous meme. That's his quota for any cards that he might find. He runs it through that system, and it does a pretty good job, but we're going to talk about that and why it's not always better. There are some factors, especially nowadays with modern and all that are definitely, throws a curveball in some of that stuff. So, but yeah. What's going on? I guess we can hop into news unless you got something else to announce.
Well, it's not really so much an announcement. I guess it's more of an update. I was able to successfully sell off my slabs, like I mentioned in the last episode. I got pretty close to the value I was wanting, honestly. There was a little bit of variance, which I kind of expected, and they were kind of on, well, some of them were junk slabs. Not all, but some of them that were junk slabs were quite common, like the Evolutions, PSA 9s. But he took them all, and he really did honor the market price, and everything was fair. I got pretty much that close to 70% between the cash and store credit. And honestly, I mean, the guy was great to chit chat with, and it was Eddie Gaming in St. Louis.
It was pretty cool store in there too.
Yeah, everything's separate. I should have kind of figured this, but yeah, their online store is completely separate. I did keep an eye on everything, and depending on how much I was going to get was going to dictate how much I was going to get in cards. And I ended up actually going with the Shiny Magikarp and Masaki Machamp, and they were both in near mint. Their March is lightly played, but I mean, they were on the borderline between like lightly played and near mint, but I would say they lean near mint, low and near mint.
Yeah, they looked pretty good, and they didn't seem to have the Masaki mark on the Machamp, which that alone is pretty good in itself. So.
Yeah, and that was a Kamiya card, obviously, and I have that in the English variant, the promo, but I didn't have the holo for the Japanese variant, so that one is one of the Kamiya's more expensive cards, so it was good to get to add off the list. And the Shiny Magikarp is the first Shining that I was able to get, and yeah, I think I'm going to try to finish maybe knee over head this year, honestly.
Yep. I had a bunch to sell as well. I went the eBay route with mine. Did really well with a lot of auctions. Did better than expected, really. Just one hiccup, though. I shipped one of my bigger cards, the Grand Party PSA 10 that I was selling. I sold that and the Mimikyu Screen Promo PSA 10 to just buy back the 9 because I kind of, I graded those myself, kind of made the decision to just go after the 9s on those. And yeah, the hiccup was that the Grand Party sold through the global shipping program and ended up getting damaged. And so, yeah, that was kind of a bummer for sure. Should be getting refunded on both ends, though. Obviously, it's not the buyer's fault. I guess technically, you could buy it, damage it, and just return it. But that's a pretty crappy thing to do. But the guy seemed genuine, and I think he's a pretty serious collector. He's really cool with the process. We had to wait like an extra 5 days for eBay to step in. And so we waited for that to happen. Not that, I don't want to refund the guy, but it said on there, like, if you think your card has been damaged by the global shipping program, wait till this date and then we can step in. So that's what we did. And today was actually the day that they could step in. So by talking to the eBay people, I kind of had to go around and talk to a couple of them. But it seems like they're moving towards, refunding both of us. They wanted him to keep the card and fill out this form that's like an affidavit or something in case like it sounds like they're going through the insurance process, if that makes sense, on their damaged goods. So just gonna have to wait. It's been kind of antsy. I have like $2,000 on hold on my eBay.
And what's worse is it's halfway across the world.
I know.
What country did it end up going to, out of curiosity?
I think Singapore.
Oh, no, that's more like all the way around the world. Well, I guess it is literally halfway around the world.
And I tell you what, I've had, like, Singapore is hopping with the collectors, like high-end collectors too, because I've had multiple big cards go to Singapore. I feel like Singapore is like one of the main places that I ship to through like my higher end cards on the global shipping program.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Just that's I'm Brandon Tan.
Yeah,
hardcore player in Pokemon Go. So I mean, it's not really too crazy to think that there's also some pretty crazy collectors out there too.
I almost never ship to Japan though. I think that's kind of funny. Like, I guess Japan has their own access to their own stuff.
Well, yeah, like buy, I don't know how many people use that, but you have to wonder if there's also maybe like certain discords or some sort of chats or something.
Yeah.
Forums maybe that we don't, I mean, I figure somebody would know about it, right? But who knows? It seems like also it seems to be a lot of times that, I don't know, there's just the difference in language and communication sometimes makes it to where it's really difficult to facilitate those connections, honestly.
Yeah, and a lot of their, Yahoo Japan is big over there. So, like, a lot of their sales are on Yahoo Japan rather than, like, eBay. Yeah. So it's, like, totally different marketplaces, so that makes sense. But, yeah, Singapore and then the UK and then Australia are the ones, like, I remember. But Australia has been, like, not as often because they updated their import tax or something like that, or their shipping costs. I don't know, something weird happened there, but I sent a lot of stuff to UK and Singapore for sure. But yeah, hopefully, if you guys use the global shipping program and it looks like the item's damaged, essentially you ship it to the global shipping program, right? And once they have it, like, that's all you're responsible for. So then they ship it through their shipping program and they pay they do all the custom stuff and they handle it on there and it gets all new insurance. So yeah, it should fall on them. And they didn't notify me when they received it, like, hey, the package is damaged. And the buyer actually sent me, they put different stamps. They do a new label on the package. And that was actually, like, crunched up as well. So it's very obvious, like, it pretty much happened after the fact. But yeah, it's pretty rough. The PSA case is cracked on both sides. It's one of those
right over the front of the card too. Right over the front of it.
Yeah, and
it didn't look like it went all the way through, so that would be good as the buyer, I guess.
And some of those, like, I've seen them before where if the plastic doesn't separate, like if there was just pressure on the plastic that made it crack, but there wasn't pressure on one side enough to make it, like, separate, then the card is usually good, but you never know. Like, if it broke and then something pushed down on one side of the crack harder than the other side, it pushes into the car and then there could be indenting. But if it was just even pressure that made it cracked, then it should be fine, but you never know. And I'm not about to test it if I don't have to.
No, but the other guy could.
Yeah, that's the only weird thing. So yeah, if they refund us both, then you know I guess he keeps the card as well. I mean, he could bust it out even if it's dented. I mean, it's still three,
You
four hundred
still,
bucks.
I mean, he still has the
So
card. So I mean, I don't know how he would send a PSA. I guess the nearest one would be, I guess, the UK or would it be California from there. But I don't know if they would allow such international packages. He would have to have like a. He would almost have to get like a account at like Heritage or some
yeah,
sort of vault or something like that that ships to you.
it's weird. Like with any other item that makes sense. Like most people can't take a damaged item and sell it for a good amount of money. But with Pokemon cards, you know, I'm thankful that it's looking like I'm going to not have to pay this, but it's like what keeps people from buying graded cards and like breaking them in a safe way and then like getting a refund and then resubmitting.
I think you'd have to be very elaborate to try to do that, and then once that happens, I bet eBay would also see a consistent trend.
Yeah.
So that would also come into effect. Like, oh, this is your third card you have reported damaged in a row. That's over two thousand
Yeah.
dollars. Eventually, there would be that, and there would be like, okay, you're gonna have to start recording complete video proof of everything before we accept anything else, or something like that. I don't know,
Yeah.
but there would be tightening up of the loopholes.
Or you could just have multiple accounts or different addresses. And like, I almost hate saying this process, but like, someone could buy an item through the GSP, damage it, and then tell the seller, hey, just wait and let GSP cover this. And so then GSP covers it, and then he doesn't have to send the card back. Because, like, yeah, normally it doesn't benefit him because he has to send it back in order to get the refund. But in this weird loophole, like, you could, I guess, get free cards without screwing over the seller. Like, you just both get refunded and keep the card. So I don't know. It's a weird loophole, but yeah, they almost certainly be tracking that, like you said, to make sure it's not happening multiple times. But yeah, another thing we want to talk about though with graded cards, we do have numbers on how many cards that were graded by each company for September. And we're not going to elaborate too much on this because we got a pretty good question, and we'll talk more about it there. But no surprise, PSA came in right about 1 million cards for September.
Mm-hmm.
And the other three are CGC, SGC, and BGS. What do you think is 1, 2, and 3? Not counting PSA being number 1, obviously, but what do you think 2, 3, 4 are? What order?
CGC, I could see SGC being 3 and then BGS being 4.
You are correct.
Oh, am I really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
SGC beats out BGS, but
They're growing. It's interesting to see that, but it's starting to spread from the sports community slowly, trickle into the Pokemon community. And you know what? I mean, I've also seen people with Disney Lorcana cards also, but it's still not there yet. Like from what I like, they seem like they grade pretty well. I mean, their case I'm kind of iffy towards, or their slab, but they seem to be consistent. A lot of people like them, and I mean, consistency sometimes is key. That's all you need as a grading company. Like that's consistency of multiple factors, but that's how you can really build a following within the hobby.
yeah, I like their slab. I like the black background.
All black,
Um,
black.
yeah, I don't like I like the simplicity. I like their style more than CGC, but I like CGC's stuff more. Like I like the aesthetic of SGC, but I like
Their labels kind of.
yeah, they're I like that they're plain, but they're almost too plain. I like CGC's case more and stuff like that. It's like a weird blend, but
Like the black.
BGS, BGS. I
Honestly,
mean, I don't really care for across the board myself.
mm-hmm. Yeah, the black border for the SGC is really makes the card pop.
Yeah. But yeah, CGC graded 90,000 cards, so about a tenth of what PSA is grading.
I would just say that's not even close at all. I thought the numbers would be a little bit closer, but yeah, that's 9%.
Yeah. Yeah, PSA at a million, CGC at 90,000, SGC at 69,000, and BGS is at 63,000. So pretty close between SGC and BGS, but yeah, we'll talk about more. We'll talk about that more down in the question section because yeah, we do have a good question on that, and especially about the future BGS and CGC, especially in Pokemon side of things.
I'm sure the opening up of PSA's tiers has a lot to do with that too. People have been just waiting to send the PSA for a long time.
Well, yeah, it's been a big talking point since that $15 tier opened. I mean, yeah, people this whole time were like, CGC for smaller cards, PSA for big cards, but now that we're seeing that lower tier, I mean, people having different opinions now, so it didn't take long to swap that. And I don't think we really expected PSA to go this low this quick, but they going. But yeah, more about that in the question though.
Yeah.
The only other things we want to mention is the Charizard UPC. So just last week's episode, we did a how low can it go in our game. And yeah, it can go pretty low. So Target.
And
go ahead.
I say, guess what? The pre-order's still available on Target.
I thought I looked this evening and it was like pre-orders have been sold out or something like that.
I mean, I could click the option, but yeah, here, let me just click the option. Pre-order now. Oh, okay, it is out of stock. But why would it give me that option? Anyways, never mind.
Yeah, it was on. It went up on Target today, and it was up for hours at least. Like there seemed to be a lot, and I mean, it was going around like wildfire on social media too.
I mean, I got mine. I wasn't even worried about getting mine. And look at that. I got up. It was like 8:30 a.m. It's like, oh, order. That's all I did.
Well, you told me about it, and then I waited, and then it was like 11, almost noon before I ordered mine. Like I ordered another one. But then I think shortly after I ordered, they got shut down again, or the pre-orders sold out. But
well, even the Poke Center was still kind of going off and on. Like at first, before I got the notification that Target was available, I tried Pokemon Center, and I got all the way to the checkout, and I don't even know. I might have gotten it. I haven't actually looked at my card to see if I have a $1 hold. There has been some stuff I've ordered where it didn't show anything, and it just showed up. Or I got an email, is what it was. That was the celebrations.
I've had that too. It's like Pokemon Center. It's really weird for orders. I had that problem when I was trying to use my special delivery Charizard code. Like the order just would not go through. And I was like, great. And then I had to wait until like super late at night, like this time at night, and to get my order in pretty much. I don't know what it is. But yeah, I think it's already below my price point. Think it's going to be below Phillip's price point as well.
Yeah, I saw some going for like 157. They haven't broke 150 yet. I mean, I'm thinking it's going to go down to potentially. I would be shocked if it actually goes down to MSRP on eBay. I would. I just couldn't imagine that with their fees and like most of these people eating shipping. I mean, it's possible. So I guess it's possible it can go down to 130, 120. But or I should say, I think it's probably going to get down to 120, but I would be kind of surprised if it goes down below 135 on eBay. You might be able to find it. There's so many places that you can get a MSRP for the secondary market to be above really like the fees and shipping. I would be very surprised. Essentially, MSRP plus potentially fees and shipping, and that'd be like the max. That's probably like 135, 140 or something like that.
Yeah, I think I have a hard time seeing it, bust down below 150 just because that's like I feel like that's a price that people would be willing to pay just to scoop these up, just because. Like I think, kind of what we were talking about with the Disney Lorcana cards, it made so much sense to us that those cards could easily be like $200 to $300 cards in PSA graded cases. So like it justified the price. These are kind of the same thing. Like if you grade all three of these cards, it's kind of hard for me to like see them less than $100. So right there, I mean, that's $300 with the grading fees. I mean, even if you shave that down to like $200, that's quite a bit of wiggle room. I mean, people would buy these for 150 to grade those and make, 50, $100 pretty easily.
I could honestly, I could say two of the three being $100 and the 10. The VMAX, I'm not so sure, but it's possible because it still is a cool card. Um,
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, there's going to be so many of these graded. Every company. I do think they will be around $100, but once, I mean, when they first hit the market, like there's going to be a flood, right? But it's going to go down like usual. I would say around 100 for that, but yeah, I just can't see some of those being like 150, 200 though in a 10.
But even if they're 100 a piece, it's like, you could buy that box for 160, grade them, get them back, pay for shipping for all under $200 and sell them for 300. It's a pretty good turnaround there, but that's what I'm thinking. Like I think those cards artwork are just like the artwork and being Charizard, it's just so good that they're easily going to be $100 cards. I would almost say the PSA 9 should be close to $100, but you know, that's just me thinking of like what the product is, but that's not considering how many there are.
Hmm.
And yeah, with it being up on Target, I mean, yeah, there could be just so many of these. And the GameStop
That's what I'm
pre-orders stay
thinking.
open as well for a while too.
Yeah, that's my reasoning is people are gonna love these cards, and they probably could even go up higher, but like I can't imagine them ever being crazy expensive, like $1,000 in 20 years, maybe with inflation. I mean, that's like the most. But because I think there's gonna be that many. I really do. I still do not think we fully grasp necessarily how much has been printed for some of these cards, and I think we can't know. It's gonna take time, like years, honestly, for us to fully realize just how much are being printed for like all these mainstay cards, like your special delivery Charizard, your Charizard UPC, and I mean to some extent potentially even some of the alt arts. Obviously they're hard to pull, but I mean still it's something to consider.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's hard to tell. I mean, I think a lot of us are kind of misguided because we're thinking of the celebrations with the metal cards.
Yeah,
And that's a hard product to print in general. I mean, you got those metal cards in there. And that's why like I kind of believe in that product. Just the fact that there's metal cards and the manufacturing is a lot more, that goes into that box than this box. This is just cards. So it's definitely a different game for sure. I think the Arceus UPC is going to be, more rare than the Charizard because they got metal cards
yeah,
in there.
yeah. I,
But
I I got that one on pre-order, but they're not gold cards, so that kind of sucks.
yeah, I was
Um,
bummed that it was just a normal card, just metal.
Yeah, but whatever. I bought it. I'm gonna open it. I ripped finally like my Pokemon Go Center ETB, and I had so much fun just slowly opening it and just appreciating it that I'm very excited to open both this Charizard UPC and the RCS UPC. And I'm not even worried anymore about, oh, I got to keep it sealed for the potential value.
Yeah.
Just to me, that no longer seems attractive. I mean, if you're really in love with that box, obviously, and I think I will do that on a few items, but like, no reason to do it as for stonks. I feel like I'm just enjoying it more, not worrying about sealed with after learning so much within the hobby how sealed and selling it is viewed. It's more carefree, honestly.
Yeah, and that's the way to go. I mean, it'll pay off eventually. But I was gonna say one more thing, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, the Arceus box. Like, it's also a bummer to me that they just picked a playable. Like, yeah, it's an iconic card
Oh
because it's
yeah,
playable. Like, they could have, not being gold is one thing, so it's not really, as special. But the card they picked, I mean, yeah, it's the people that is marketed to, like, don't really want that. Like, they want the card to play. They don't really want the card as a collectible. And so the people who are collecting, who go after like something like this, special products, they don't really care about that Arceus because that Arceus isn't really collectible. It's only
yeah.
pricey because it's playable. So it's just kind of a yin and yang opposite of their target audience here.
It's upsetting. I was hoping for a special alt art or something. Um,
Or
I
just
was
any of the
bummed
old
about that.
Arceus cards or any of the modern promos.
Well, I was hoping for, or like a one that was redone from other alt arts. Like it didn't have to be a brand new one either. It could have been, the V or the promo from Japan. It could have been any of those.
Yeah.
Just something, just something.
Then on top of that, it's a different style box that don't even match the other ones. That got my
Yeah.
OCD a little bit, but
I mean, it's sleek though.
yeah, it looks cool. But
Well, and then you have the big one coming out with the next three is actually the one from Japan, the end of era promo. That's the biggest one, and seems like it's coming out next month, and nobody's talking about it.
yeah, I kind of fly under
But
the radar.
I'd be shocked. But who knows? You could be right.
Yeah, I got a few cards on my radar. I'm gonna wait to get this case closed on eBay, and then hopefully be able to use that money to get some stuff done. I already bought back the Mimikyu and the Grand Party. Like, I'm pretty good with all the other cards I sold, but yeah, ready to get those going for sure. That might be on my list next month. But I mean, yeah, the only other thing I think we wanted to mention, maybe our PSA updates. You got some
Oh
Lorcana
yeah,
updates on your cards?
yeah. So what can I say? I'm a lucky guy. um, I was not expecting getting 6 out of 7 tens. And the only nine that I got was the Mickey promo, and I'm honestly thankful that I got a nine because there I mentioned in one of the earlier episodes there was a piece of edgeware that I missed in the photos. And looking at it, I'm like, I could get as bad as a six. I could get a nine. I could get a 10. Who knows? And the
Yeah.
fact that I got a nine, whatever. I'm thankful I got that. It should I would have gotten a 10 if it weren't for that, but it is what it is. It was a crisp Mickey. But the other ones, yeah, Elsa, Stitch, Hook, Cruella,
The whole
Maleficent.
set.
Yeah, the whole set was all tens. And
Nice.
yeah, I can't even explain the amount of energy that was bursting through me. Um, and I did not get upcharged, so I was pretty stoked about that. I just missed that, and so that cut down on the cost that I was expecting because I was doing the math. if I would have got upcharged like the math that it was going to hit me with, it would have been like almost $1,600, and I dodged a bullet. So I'm
Yeah,
thankful.
it's gonna be a
I'm
lot.
thankful. Yeah, I'm thankful, and I don't know if they have to pay the price thing yet, but I
No,
know they will
they're
soon.
still not upcharging yet.
Yeah.
They did announce it on their, Instagram that hey, we're grading Lorcana cards now.
So it's common. It's common.
Yeah, usually how it works is like they'll announce it, so now it's like official, and then the cards they get back after they announce it, like those are usually the first ones where it's kind of targets for upcharges. So mine are already through the system. I should be hearing about a shipment, any day now. I kind
Yeah.
of expect it today, but I'm sure it'll be tomorrow maybe. I sent a Shadowless Charizard in at the same time, and it was only one card, but it's already on its way back. It got a 6, which kind of on the fence about. I was thinking it'd be like a 6 to 8 range, and it did get the 6, but it does have quite a bit of hollow scratching. But it's a really nice
Yeah.
looking one. Like, it's a strong 6 for sure.
Yeah. I think they looked at it, and after you showed me the images, and they probably it probably went from like in potentially like a 7 or 8 to a 6. My guess is because the scratches, I noticed it pretty quick.
Yeah.
So if it would have had scratches, that would have been fine. But I think having so many is what did you in.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like the whole hollow. Like, it's a really
yeah.
nice, clean card. Like, as far as like centering and like card stock. But yeah, it's
Hmm.
a lot of little nicks in there and stuff like that. But either way, I needed to get it graded. I sent out all my other Shadowless cards in a $15 sub, and I might sell all those. Like, I'll keep the Charizard, obviously, but I might sell all the rest. I don't know. But yeah, I
Oh, the
guess
Lorcana?
no, the Shadowless
Oh.
cards.
Oh, okay. I was like,
My
okay.
Lorcana cards, I don't know.
I'm not gonna stop you, but
I'm kind of in a tough spot with Lorcana. Like, if I get all tens, I'd probably keep them all. If I got all nines, I'd probably keep them all. But I think I'm gonna get a mix. I think my Elsa is probably gonna be one of those nines. And there was one other, maybe my Robin Hood or my Captain Hook. I think had like they were gonna be a potential 9. So like I don't think mine, like even from the start, were as good as yours, but I'm more about consistency, and I collect nines, so I almost want those at a 9, so I can just buy, or I could just sell the tens and buy the nines. But if somehow I get all tens, like I'll probably just keep them as that. But I don't think I'll get all tens. Might
yeah,
just go
tough
for
spot.
a 9 set.
Or
'Cause
just go for a new set to sell everything and try again. You could. I mean,
yeah, I
but the
don't
nines
know.
are also going so low too that it's almost like not worth it. The side nine was so low unless it's an Elsa or a Stitch. Everything else seems like it's going pretty low for a nine. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, they're pretty much evening out. Um, yeah, I'd probably sell the tens and just buy nines. Cause like I'm more about just having a set, and that's what I collect is nines. So that's
Hmm.
really all I want. My Mickey, I mean, I'm sure my Mickey's gonna be a 10, and my signed Mickey's probably also a good shot at a 10.
Did you do the 10 and the auto, like the grade on the auto and the 10?
I did a card grade and just authentic on the auto. I
Okay.
was I was worried that if they did an auto grade, since there's 2 signatures, they wouldn't grade it. And I don't really care. Like I think auto grades are kind of dumb, honestly, because
Yeah.
they measure like the pen stroke and the vibrancy of the ink and weird stuff like that. It's like I don't care if his pen was like at the end of its life. He signed it, you know. I
Yeah.
just want it to be marked like authentic, like it's a real signature. And I just like so that I just did the card grade, so it should say like grade and then authentic on the auto. And I saw people on the discords too, like their names weren't even in the system yet, so they were having trouble authenticating. So hopefully just putting authentic like that, they're a little more lenient to that maybe. But yeah. I guess we should hop on to the main topic though. That was quite
Yeah, no,
the
we
intro
could.
section there.
I want to say it was the intro news, and it lasted I think a little bit longer than we planned. And we really, we'll probably end up doing like a Lorcana, or I hope we end up doing something over the Lorcana once we get everything back, and we can just kind of go into detail and just get all out of our systems, and we'll put it on the back burner for a little bit.
Yeah. If
I
you
know
can't,
some people are probably interested, but not all, I'm sure. So
yeah, if you can't tell, we're all in on the Lorcana, and yeah, I
yeah,
feel like I could talk about. It's crazy how little we know about Lorcana, but how much we could talk about it. You know,
yeah.
and it always, ever since it's been announced, we've been talking about every episode. I think at least mentioning it.
I'm hyped as a collector and potentially a player, and I guess you can argue that I'm probably an investor slash speculator. I'm all three right now,
Yeah,
and you know I'm okay with that. That's kind of how you like the whole idea is selling it. I would like to keep the nines as like a memory, and then put more money towards more premier cards and big collection goals in Pokemon. That's kind of the idea. Like I'm using it as a funneling towards my Pokemon hobby, but also I'm going to be collecting some of Morcana as well.
yeah.
So
I'd say I'm like all collector, I guess, because like I'm already feeling like I don't want to do all that work. I just want to get my set complete in PSA 9 and be happy with that. And just
yeah,
continue with Pokemon.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I can see it. It's just I have a first edition Charizard I want, and I got a Mario and Luigi Pikachu I need to get, and those ain't cheap. So
If the funds clear on eBay, it's enough to cover a PSA 9 Mario Pikachu. And if I could get that, and that's a very real possibility. But I could also knock out like a good chunk of my other stuff that's probably going to go up before I come around to it again.
yeah.
So, like that dang stamp box beauty looking back Pikachu. I need one of
Oh my
those.
god, you should just get it. Jesus.
Yeah. I have enough
Like,
extra now to get it, like even without that. But I also have some set cards I want to buy and that and a couple other
but
lower ones.
I want to say you're probably good on that card because I don't think it's going to increase in value too much in the near future.
I could see it easily being $500.
And a 10 maybe.
Yeah.
There was I think 80,000 of those made.
The nines are
Some
pretty cheap. I think a
I was
Cramorant 9 is like $100.
well, I sent those into the bulk order we did, and I'm pretty sure they're both going to be 10. So
Yeah. Well, if they're nines, I'll be interested.
yeah, I'll probably be selling them, and I'll be buying a stamp box or something because the chance of it being a 10 is so high.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Main topic is older rare minter always better. So, yeah, another thing going on so long, this might be a little quicker segment. So we're already probably halfway through the length of the podcast, but
If we haven't put you to sleep yet, we got a topic that will excite you. So
so yeah. Older rare minter, is it always better? Now, my biggest thing for this comes with a time period, and I want to go back to 2016. Like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, this was pretty much the time when this term was, going around. Like I said, S.M. Pratt made it a popular meme. Even had it on a T-shirt, but he always would say, "Older rare minter better." That's the guidelines. And I would argue that in 2016, that was pretty much correct for the majority of the hobby. And I was thinking about this like, that was pretty much true back then, but why is that? And I pretty much narrowed it down. I think, everyone who was in the hobby in 2016 was an OG collector, essentially. Nobody really chased after modern until evolutions came around and spiced things up again. Before evolutions in 2016, there wasn't the modern scene even close to what you see today. And everyone who was active in the community, everyone who was collecting, were people like myself, people who grew up with the OG stuff, and that's the main thing they wanted. So by habit, older is better. Like base set's better. That's the OGs. And then you get into stuff like rarer. Okay, well you've by that point you had some rare promos and stuff. Especially on the Japan side, you were already getting some really unique promos, but that pretty much covered everything that was on the rare side. So rare cards were better, although super niches existed. And just like today, if you get too much niche of a card, you might not see that growth because it's just so niche. I feel like you run in a lot of that with the Japanese cards and special P promos and stuff like that. But Minter, obviously, I think that's always going to be true across the board, even today. The better condition of card you can buy, the better it's going to do. But yeah, that was the main point I wanted to make. In 2016, that statement was completely different than today. Because now that can't really be applied in the same way. Because as we speak, old WotC Hollows from base set is arguably, struggling quite a bit right now. While modern is at like peak hype, hyper than 2020 hype. And you have stuff like Umbreon Alt Art VMAX going for over $1,000 now. I don't know if you saw that. But
Seriously,
yeah.
I haven't checked it in like the last time I checked it was whenever we went to KCCon.
I think it's over $1,000 now. And the Japanese one is like 2,000. So yeah, older is definitely not the case anymore because we are seeing this unprecedented hype train of modern. Minter is still true. Rare is not always true anymore. But there's a few other factors now that come into play, and I think you cover those pretty well in your system if you want to touch on those.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I kind of hinted this in the last episode, but I actually didn't have everything listed down, and I kind of got sidetracked of a few mentally at the time of like what were some of the factors that I had in mind. And I took some time between the last episode and now to kind of write those down and clarify a little bit because Pratt does get it right. He does. However, he's missing other factors. I think at this point there needs to be an updated methodology, and I don't think there is anything perfect, nor do I think my thing follows the scientific method. It doesn't. I think some of this is just kind of my opinion as a collector. And those five factors are, in my opinion, scarcity, art, Pokemon, the history slash story of the card, and nostalgia slash knowledge of the card, like the awareness of the card. You mentioned it before with a level of niche of how niche a card might be, and that kind of put forth something in my mind. Just kind of figured, oh, I should check out the WB Illustrator cards once you mentioned the Japanese, or not the Japanese, but the Umbreon VMAX, and you know those cards. That there's a Trico. So okay, the history of like the WB promos were essentially kids would submitted submissions of some of the Pokemon that they had in mind, or I can't remember if it was the parameters. I'll have to look up on it if it was the parameters of they choose certain Pokemon. But anyways, there were some winners, and there was a very limited run of amount of these cards sent out. I think it was like I'd have to update it, but it wasn't a significant amount. Anyways, it's a very scarce amount. It's under 5,000, and those cards are going for only a couple hundred. Yet this modern card, this Japanese Umbreon, is going for, or not Japanese Umbreon VMAX, excuse me, is going for $1,000 in a 10 and hundreds of dollars raw. and everybody knows how much they've been printing this past year and a half. And also, I mean, everybody knows how hard it is to pull a VR VMAX. But this thing has other factors working for it that I mentioned. And in that opinion, that would be included into the Pokemon aspect. The Pokemon also includes the amount of interest in that Pokemon. So, for example, like a Charizard is going to pretty much always outperform a Caterpie or a Credent or I mean, just take your pick on any obscure Pokemon that you can think of from Gen 6, 7, or 8, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, but ultimately, the Pokemon does matter. And that's a major case in the potential value of a card. And of the factors I mentioned, it doesn't have to be all of those factors, but the more factors that you can check off for these, the better. And the better indication that how that card will do. Because there are definitely exceptions to the norm and ones that only have two or three of these factors, but still continue to do well. And one of the cards that's also very common that somehow continues to do well, despite how common it is the Unlimited Charizard. That thing in a PSA 1, 2, PSA 1 or 2 is like nearly $200. In fact, I don't think I told you this whenever I went to Heady Gaming. But whenever I was selling my cards and I kind of set everything off and I had this list and he was going through them and he looked at my PSA 2 and limited Charizard because this guy is clearly an OG. Like this guy's a little bit older.
Yeah.
And he said, he looked at my PSA 2 limited charge and he was like, he started chuckling. He was like, God bless America for being able to submit this in, and then somebody clearly buys it. Because, you know, this guy's been in the hobby long enough to know that a limited Charizard is very, very common. But that
Yep.
doesn't matter. It still maintains its value based on simply the fact that it's Pokemon, but also it clicks off the art, the history, and the nostalgia aspect. It's got four of the five things that I mentioned going for it. It's one of the most iconic cards, top three most iconic. Well, it is the most iconic Charizard card, absolutely. Even though it's not the best card art for Charizard, that'd be the Gold Star in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I'm just on a whole other level. But it doesn't matter because it clicks off several other factors. Now, you know, WotC was mass printed, but it's still not printed to the point where modern is today. But it doesn't matter because that's how many people in this hobby are interested in modern. It is its own market. It's probably now the largest chunk of the market, even though the most expensive cards are mainly from the WotC era and or before, or if they're not from necessarily the WotC era, they're like early Pokemon, obviously like the Illustrator, First Edition Charizard, First Edition Lugia, you know, the Gold Star, Umbreon, Rayquaza, Charizard. You know, well, that's more for the Lost Era, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's always going to be iconic for sure.
and let's see, the art aspect doesn't necessarily have to include just the actual art of what's on the card. It could include the stock of the card, the style, and the foil and hollow of the card as well. Because you take a look at some of the, for example, I think the sparkling cards, the radiant cards from some of the most recent sets are a really great example of this as well. For like the foil slash hollow, is you have that ugly yellow border on the English, and then with the Japanese, it has that nice clean silver border where everything just pops, and you are just awestruck by the aesthetic that you're getting from the card. And in my opinion, as a collector, that makes a huge difference. And I think it does for a lot of people. But there's also a huge factor that collect modern that only wants cards that they can read. But there's also a huge growing market as well of English collectors that collect Japanese.
Yeah. I've been noticing, like in my collection, I was just thinking about today, Because in that sub I got back, I have the Surfing and Flying Pikachu PSA 9, and they're siblings, like in cert numbers. So it's like I set those aside because I was going to keep them, and then I put them in the sell pile because I'm like, well, I only collect Japanese of cards I like, but, you know, so I put them back in the sale pile for that reason. But I actually put them back in the collection pile because I was thinking about the point you just made, like how most cards look better in Japanese to me, especially the Radiant cards, like you said. I mean, it's just vastly different. The yellow border just does not do justice on some cards. But I was looking at those Black Star promos, and they look good in English. And then when you look at the Japanese counterpart and something like that, the card stock was on that glossy card stock from back in the day that I don't like as much. So I came to the conclusion, like, I'm not going to be a stickler and only go for Japanese. Like, I'm going to go for, what I like. Whichever version I like more, that's what I'm going to get. So, but yeah, you definitely run into that, though. It seems like the Japanese cards, in a lot of cases, they have a lot more hollow patterns that they use as well, especially the reverse hollows. I mean, they have some amazing reverses compared to ours, which has been the same boring reverse cards for a long time. Definitely need to spice that up. But
Well, I think also art. The reason why you have to include foil with the art is, for example, there was the Pokemon GO set. There was a Charizard card that was in that one, besides the Radiant, where he's like flying through the city or whatever. And yes, it's common, but people aren't exactly, oh, I got to have this card.
yeah,
And why is that? I mean, there's a lot of other factors that mostly that include the art for why that card isn't as desired as other Charizard cards. Like art is a huge factor into what is going to be a potential card that might do better or might, for whatever reason, continue to have a strong hold upon the hobby. And for me, art is one of the most important factors for me as a collector. I have a whole thing of bulk that is just cards that I like because I like the artwork for one reason or another. Commons, rares, everything in between. And there are a lot of great common cards that have great art. And they are kind of the underappreciated cards by a lot of individuals in the hobby when going through trying to get their chase and their fix for whatever card it is that they're chasing in that set. And, I think sometimes, like you mentioned before, like a hollow isn't even appreciated by a lot of people. And, I have some opinions with how they do some of their hollows nowadays. I don't like how they do the foiling on some of their hollows, but I can still appreciate them because of the other aspects of the art. But at the same time, that doesn't limit me from just appreciating a hollow as well. But there's just a lot of the great artwork on cards are overlooked because people are solely fixated on the chase. And I think that's something that is really unfortunate with a lot of these cards. Sometimes the way they're pumping out these sets, it does make it. Some of the art does kind of look generic. I will be honest with you there. Like I totally get sometimes why people don't think about commons because they are just mass producing as many cards as they can in some of these sets. It feels like,
yeah,
but there are still a lot of good artwork as well. Like I get where they're coming from, but I think they're overlooking a lot of a great part of the hobby where you can enjoy this hobby on very very cheap amount if you wanted to.
yeah. It kind of reflects on what Magic is doing right now. Talk about oversaturation in Pokemon. Man, Magic is on a whole nother level right now. They pretty much, like, when a product is released, like the same week they get spoilers for other sets that's coming out literally like 2 weeks later. Like they have so many interlocking and interlapping products now that people are done. I mean, it's literally fatigue. They have their base sets, and then they have their special sets, and then they have their special products, which is like high end or side sets, and then they have their secret layers, which is special collection cards. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think Pokemon is able to withstand that because they're keeping it to where it's only a handful of cards in each set that people are chasing, or that's where people's focus is on. So I
Yeah,
think people aren't necessarily being overwhelmed. If anything, they'll be more overwhelmed with how many sets they're starting to push out in a year. Like by the time they're getting their fill with one set, it's already time for the next set, and that's what people are talking about. And I feel some people get the FOMO and they feel like they got to stay with the rest of their community or their little social media bubble, and they got to just kind of keep on going with some of these chase cards, and they just feel overwhelmed. And I think there is that segment of the hobby as well. But
yeah,
it's great that that Pokemon as a company, they are also kind of spreading what type of alt arts they are doing for the type of Pokemon that they're doing it with. Like there, we had the one of the Reggies had a new alt art, and I mean, I don't really care for it. Yeah, it has Lugia in the background, but the card itself, I'm just meh. In my
yeah,
opinion, the one that steals the show is the unknown alt art, and that's kind of what goes to show you, like the Lugia one isn't the great one either in terms of art. Even though it's going to be scarce, it's going to be probably one of the more harder ones to pull in the set. Scarce in terms of pull rates, I guess I should say, because there will be a lot, but still not as much as most of the other cards, is what I imagine.
yeah. People are still gonna go crazy for it, but yeah, that's why art is a weird one for me because I guess it's so subjective, and my art style of what I like is weird. I mean, I like symmetry on cards or certain poses. Like, I don't like the Moonbreon, the modern Moonbreon. I don't really like the way that card looks, in my opinion. In my opinion, but
You okay there?
yeah, color hiccup.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a. I don't know. My taste for the art is weird, but I do agree with the unknown in this set. Like that's the one that stood out to me. And the Lugia is cool and all, and I could see the craze for that. But yeah, I don't know. I like the
That one.
OG Moonbreon from Neo. That's the
Yeah.
OG. No, I've mentioned that
So,
before, but I hate that they call
so
the new one Moonbreon because that's the true Moonbreon.
well, that's also one thing about that card is it's the iconic card of this era and in many ways this generation. And we'll talk about a little more the nostalgia aspect and how that could play a role in the future. And we mentioned some also just to kind of touch up on this. We did mention how there are counterintuitive points for scarcity, but if you look at the most sought after cards in the hobby, some of the most expensive cards in the hobby, they are incredibly rare. The the Illustrator are only around 39 to 41 copies, something like that.
Yeah,
And then if you incorporate condition on other factors, but like PSA 10 Charizard first edition, but there's also trophies. The trophies are some of the most expensive ones. Like scarcity is definitely a powerful factor, but it by itself doesn't necessarily guarantee excess value. I think one example that some people might not know, as I mentioned, was the WB promos. Those, because it doesn't include the knowledge of these cards, and everybody's aware of it. So because of that, they're not as expensive. Now they can get a little bit up there in high grades, but the card itself, I mean, you can collect all of them if you wanted for not, I mean, less expensive than it would cost to collect it in modern day whole set.
yeah.
That's for
You
sure.
you almost have to look at all these factors in its own grouping now too. Like I said, 2016, you could pretty much apply all and it'd be okay, but it's like now you have to break it up into its group. So like, okay, you're talking about older. So older
Mm-hmm.
what? Like, let's take a look at WotC. Is older WotC better than the end of WotC? Well, kind of depends. If you're talking about the other factor, you said nostalgia, then yeah, it's older is better. But, Skyrich Charizard is going to be more expensive than any other card before it aside from the first editions.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
older's
that,
not really better if you're thinking from a money aspect, but from a nostalgia aspect, one of your other factors, and yeah. So you almost have to break apart these into like subcategories now.
but I think if you kind of have like, I'm trying to think, it's not like a Venn diagram, but I'm trying to think of a graph. Like if you have this, refer to this. If you have
Yeah.
that, refer to this factor.
Algorithm.
Yeah. And when you have, if you kind of look at like when you look at a card, and if you think you should buy a lot of them, or you think if it's a bigger card or it's big right now, and you think you should buy in your for your card right now, or for that whatever card that you're looking at, I think kind of including all five of these and just kind of like marking off which one it fills and explaining why it fills this role and how. I think suddenly you find yourself a formula that's damn near foolproof, in my opinion, and seeing if it's worth buying in on a card. If it's very expensive and you're unsure.
It does get tough though, like when you break into those subcategories, because I'm thinking of the rarer one now, or the
Mm-hmm.
scarcity on your end, and it's like, yeah, in general, rarer is better because there's less of them, but then you break off into these niches like the snap cards for
Mm-hmm.
example, they're rarer than the illustrator and stuff like that,
Yep.
but they're kind of a niche item, so they don't go for as much, and there's multiple of them.
However,
So
if you do take another factor, a lot of the OGs in the hobby and some of the people with the biggest players in the hobby are aware of these cards and they do know their value. They do know how rare they are. And that's some of the reasons, and they do know the history behind it. Like some of those cards check off every single factor as well.
yeah,
And sometimes when you have like as little cards as or as few quantity cards as you have of these, and some of them in some cases haven't really hit the market, and suddenly you kind of understand how some cards like that rare, I mean, they just kind of do the work and how they are as expensive as they are just because of its place within the history of the hobby and the story behind that. We kind of mention everything. And the art, okay, so the art might not be the most pristine, but you know what? It ties in with Pokemon Snap. Some of our people, our generation's favorite game on the N64. That was one of my favorite games. It was what inspired me to become a photographer, straight up. So even though that the art isn't necessarily the best, it's tied into an important part, an integral part, one that includes core memories from my childhood, and I know a lot of others in my generation.
yeah. Looking at any one factor, you really got to break it down, like I said. But
You
yeah,
absolutely do.
certain cards, like if they hit all of them, you don't really have to look that deep. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, art and nostalgia are going to be more personal ones, but
Mm-hmm.
we always say collect what you like, and those are the biggest for that. But yeah, in general, it still works today, but there's a lot of other things you got to think about. It's kind of crazy what modern's doing right now. We're in the prime time of modern, and I just think back to 2016 and before. We never had a resurgence of Pokemon until Evolutions came along. So this modern hype was never seen. And it was seen in 2016 with Evolutions and a few sets, but then it kind of backed off again because that was more of like a collecting thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this time around, it's like every set. People just love collecting modern. So you
And
look,
you know what? Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say,
Go.
like, you just look at this in the future, and this is gonna be nostalgic for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
We were at the Collecticon. So many people were asking about the Moonbryon, and there wasn't very many there for sale. And I mean, we should have probably guessed this just hearing people talk about it. Like, it was crazy how much people were still on Evolving Skies and still on this Umbreon. And like, I still don't think I've seen a single good box opening of Evolving Skies to this day. I've watched quite a few of them, and I've never, like, of all the videos I've watched, if I bought that box, I'd be disappointed. I'll just put it that way. It just seems like you pull a lot of bad packs from Evolving Skies, unless, of course, you hit one of the alt arts, and then it's big money. But I don't know. It's just mind-boggling.
Well,
Like,
if you look at, so you can almost break down between two and three kind of groups of collectors, right? Like, you have your OGs, the guys that's pretty much collect exclusively Wahatsi. And then you have some of your guys that they kind of came in 2016 that collect a lot of the rare stuff, but also collect a decent chunk of modern as well, especially some of the more rare and more sought after cards within modern. And then you have this third group, the most newest group, the one that came with the most recent hype. And they are kind of the ones, that's such a large swath of the hobby that in a lot of ways they are dictating where the hobby is going. And because they are the one that are starting to kind of control a lot of the cash flow that's going through this hobby. Constantly buying new product, constantly, constantly, constantly. It's unreal how many people keep on buying English off the shelves, hoping for a Charizard, hoping for a alt art, or some of them actually do enjoy opening just to open for the hobby. And I think they should almost be thanked in some ways because they are pushing Pokemon to keep on, in a lot of ways, to keep on changing. To keep on pushing for what people are wanting within the hobby. And they are definitely, I mean, all three groups are thanks to how we've gotten to where we are. But there is something that this new group is starting to form. And as you mentioned before, I think when we get to where this era is nostalgic, anything that was nostalgic in 2020 is pretty much evolutions, the last XY set, a good portion of the Sun and Moon stats, especially like Cosmic Eclipse, all the way through Sword and Shield. These heavy hitters are going to be what's nostalgic and what's remembered, and a good portion of it's going to be the alt arts, and there's various promos as well, but a good portion are going to be the alt arts, and it's interesting because Pokemon likes to tug at the heartstrings when it comes to nostalgia. And when you reflect back to this era, what are you going to think about from this era? Primarily the alt arts, right?
yep.
I would think so. So they've shown that they're willing to do reprints, albeit with a terrible stamp. But what would be interesting is how that they would capitalize on this era, and it would even have another revamping and potentially surge from this era in 10, 20, whatever years down the road, is them making a set, all alt arts.
Yeah,
All
that'd be
arts
nuts.
as like from this era, and that would make people just go crazy for the old stuff for this era. So like the original alt arts, like the Umbreon and all that, and even go new crazy over the new stuff with the new special set. And I think that's something to think about when kind of analyzing this era and the effect on the lasting effect on the hobby. Because we're in uncharted territory, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like I think about the future a lot too, and what the hobby's gonna look like. I mean, there's so much to collect. I mean, if you spread this out, yeah, eventually anything that's not like super crazy is gonna dwindle away. But you'll have cards like the Umbreon that surpass time. Like, it'll always be popular because when people think of this era, I mean, that's the card. and I think
Yep.
it'll always be the card
Yep.
for a while. But yeah, people love it. So I always wonder about that, like what would happen in the future. I mean, we think of it with baseball, like you take any given set with baseball, there's only like one card in it that stands out. But you take multiple sets and there's only one card that stands out from one set across that entire year. So will that be Pokemon 2? I think, I don't know. It's weird to think of.
Well, and another thing to think of is I can't help but think of how they've changed the stock of the card again. And I don't know which set it was, but it was post Evolving Skies and sometime within the last year or so. And it's thinner. It's incredibly thin, the stock is. And
Yeah.
I don't know. That just has me. I mean, it's different with there's a foil on the card. Because you still have the several layers, so it still does okay, but it's not quite as thick. But like you take a look at that, and like I've had a few sports cards from Topps come in that I bought, and like they're Topps Now cards. Like Topps Now are cards they make of current events within baseball that they capitalize on, and so they mass print these. But the stock of these cards was just so crisp. It was a thicker stock, and in the hand, it was a better quality too. And they print less cards, so overall though than what Pokemon does. So that obviously, like, you can kind of understand why they do this thicker stock that they do. But at the same time, I can't help but wondering how some of these cards are going to hold up over time because of that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're very easy and everybody's grading them, but all these other cards, they're like feel like almost like paper thin, don't they?
I know it's been a thing with Japanese cards. I mean, the Scream promos are notorious for being like pretty thin. I mean, they're super thin. I think like light shines through them more than any other card. Like it's almost weird if you hold a raw one. So much so that like I remember when I got those cards in when they came out, like I think I posted the E4 like, "Hey, what's up with these cards?" And I think Charlie was the guy who responded, Charlie Herlocker, who said they were, abnormally thin. But
Hmm.
so it's been here and there. The only thing I noticed with the card quality or card stock is like the lack of quality on the English side.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just Pokemon Go set or if all sets are like this. I don't really open up any sets unless it's like a key set. Um,
Well,
but
I
man, it,
say
it
I
was terrible.
I say I took a look at my Origin, the Lost Origin, the cards I opened at the KC Con, and those cards were just as thin. I figure that's going to be the norm going forward, honestly.
Yeah. I can't remember if the Go cards were thin or if it was just crappy quality.
I felt like they were thin. Like you just kind of like rub it up and down your body or your arm or something, and you can just kind of feel how flimsy it is.
Yeah.
But
I made an Instagram post and it actually did really well. People were like sharing it and everything, but you hold a stack of the Go set commons and uncommons, and it's literally like a different stock for the commons and uncommons. Like it's darker and light, and then the width of the card is off too. Like it was really weird for me to see that just how bad it was and how inconsistent it was. And then you open up a Japanese product and it's like a solid brick, like perfectly cut. It was like just a world difference.
and it make it easier. Well, if you get signed up with like a Tenso account, it's honestly fairly easy to acquire a Japanese product, and through the emergence of people's interest in Japanese product on the English side, there's now several pretty popular businesses that really specialize in that sort of thing. So it's easier now than ever to acquire Japanese product. And I mean, honestly, the quality, the stock of the card being a decent part of that, and it just does wonders as a collector and somebody involved in this hobby, just appreciating it because it really you don't realize how big of an issue it is or how big of a factor it is until you experience it.
Yeah.
How the texture, the foil, the art, everything kind of this whole aesthetic blends and intertwines with each other that really, really invokes a different experience with the collector and with the opener. And it really, really does. It's one of the best charms in the hobby. I'll just say it like that.
Yeah. Well, what else could we talk about for it? I mean, pretty much
Yeah, I mean,
covered the bases.
scarcity, art, Pokemon, the history and story, nostalgia. Like we kind of touched up on the history with a little bit, but there are some factors that even some cards that do have history, a good history, mainly like the Lost Era Pokemon, doesn't quite get the love it deserves, and you see that with the corresponding market in some of the highest cards from that era. Well, the highest cards in the era are going to be most of your gold stars, but
Yeah.
beyond that, there's some great hollows from that era too. EX cards from that era, and I mean, yeah, there might be like $100 in decent condition, but you know what? In the grand scheme of things, that's you think that would be something more than what it is, but it's not.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess that stuff, like, yeah, there's a lot of EX era stuff that I feel is super underrated because it's just, rare and nobody collected back then. But I mean, it doesn't really have the nostalgia factor because nobody was collecting then.
And I think at this
But
point, you're just going to have people trickling in to various eras that they see on social media and certain cards. But I didn't quite realize how much of the hobby was, solely. I knew they were the majority, but I didn't realize how much of a majority they were really until recently.
yeah.
And sometimes that's kind of what being in your own social media bubble sometimes creates, is you don't always see things happening on the outlier or outside your vision, or maybe you're so focused on a certain thing within your own vision that you just don't see some of the extraneous variables that are moving because you're so focused on other things.
And a lot of people thought the big play was to go after like EX era stuff, but yeah, naturally that was the next thing. But I don't know, people have poor judgment when they're evaluating the nostalgic and reasons there. A lot of people assume like, yeah, they should be worth more, but
And they probably should be.
yeah, nostalgia is a powerful factor.
And that's
So
a big reason why a lot of us collect is that nostalgia aspect and the fact that, as you mentioned, these people weren't collecting during this era. Has less people connected to this era, and they just don't. And like, I'd rather collect modern and whatever era I grew up in. But I'm like a modern more, for example. So there is a strong factor, but obviously, as we mentioned with everything else, not the only factor. All of these factors play a role with each other, and it's really more of a guidelines. And if you think, oh, is a car going to be a good one to buy now or buy later? Just kind of look at a few factors or all these factors and just kind of like explain why. Okay, okay, okay. And before you know it, honestly, it's a pretty good basis to go by.
yeah, yeah. So does the forgotten era remain forgotten here on out? I mean, as we go, people are gonna maintain their interest in modern, and 5 years from now, they're gonna look back and Evolving Skies was, their nostalgia. That's their main drive of nostalgia. So, I mean, it's not like people are going to go back and experience the EX era anytime or
The seal
ever.
products cost too much, and then if you look, and it's sometimes it's so hard to come by, and the main cards that are value from the era are the gold cards. And honestly, a lot of people think that a lot of those cards are astronomical in value, and in high conditions, yes, they are. But last I looked, the Charizard Gold Star, and like, okay, it's not the best condition, but I'm pretty sure like it's the Charizard Gold Star Raw and beat up slash damaged condition was going under $1,000.
Yeah, I think they've been that for a while. They're always like they're expensive, but they're not like crazy expensive, but they're also like really hard to find in good condition. So they're like this weird thing. Like if they were
Like,
as popular as they like should be, then yeah, those things can get pretty nuts, but it's in the forgotten era and a lot of people are only looking at the big ones, but yeah, you can pick them up pretty decent price for lower end stuff, like lower condition, but they're tricky. I mean, I love them. I have a whole set. Probably never get rid of them. Outside of WotC, they're probably my favorite things by far, but a lot of those sets, I mean, if you don't get those pulls, it's just garbage. I mean, PokeRev opened a freaking EX Deoxys box this week, which is insane. But it was kind of a disappointing box, like no gold stars. I mean, there's only one gold star in every estimated 2 or 3 boxes. So just having those odds, like you could buy 2 boxes and not pull a gold star. I mean, that's insane.
yeah,
They're kind of like the alt arts today. I mean, yeah. Especially in a set like that with like 3 gold stars. So if you do pull that gold star, like it could be a Latios or Latias. So
yeah, and with how expensive and hard it is for those to come by, that would suck hardcore. And well, I guess my internet's crapping out right now, or it's probably my computer. Like it says, eBay won't respond. But so anyways, last I saw, they were under $1,000 that you could hit and buy. So, and I think some people think because of the hype, a lot of these people that came in from the hype, they think some of these cards are astronomical, absolutely astronomical to buy, and they really aren't. I mean, earlier this year, you could get Shadowless, like the whole non-commons and all that for under. It wasn't that much. It was like under 500, and I think you could get the whole set for like 1,000. Like it really wasn't that expensive to get the whole entire set, and even some first edition sets for base set you could get for like two or 3 grand. And I mean that's really not that bad. I mean, especially if you compare it to the price of some modern sets. And I think some people don't quite realize, like obviously they're not like PSA 10, right? They
yeah.
aren't, but I mean they're not necessarily bad condition. I understand the desire to have it near mint. I do, but like if you just wanted to collect, I mean, which is what I would be looking at for the majority of it. It's really not that bad.
I think one thing we have to think of though is like casual people are not spending $3,000 in the hobby though either.
No, they just want to spend a little bit of money at a time, and that's how they enjoy the hobby. And I think a lot of that also ties back to nostalgia as kids. That's what they remember.
Yeah.
They remember
Why?
going to the store. They
I,
remember going to the store and buying this product and opening it, and like the act itself is nostalgic. Not even just the cards, but the act itself. And I think
yeah.
that's and part of people don't care enough to research as far as we've done in the hobby, and that's a large percentage, and that's as far as they go.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like, you know, I kind of make YouTube videos not to really get big or anything, but I was listening to Dan, from Catch 'em All Collectibles, and he said something that I didn't really think about. PokeRev and these guys on YouTube you watch, they're making content catering to like the 99% of people, like casual, everyday viewers who can tune in and, surface level knowledge. And then people like him, people like me, people like all of our favorite collectors, I mean, it's kind of like you said, you're building a bubble of people that you like. But the people we like are the people who are like us, and we're in like the top 1% of the hobby, like going harder than every casual person that you've ever known, you know? So to us, it's like, oh, it's not too bad. It's only like under $500. It's like the casual person couldn't imagine spending that.
Or with the Lorcana set, $2,000 and potentially another 1,000 to grade, and and then you're looking at selling that, and you're looking at even going to the next level, and people are even high. I mean, you're on like a different level than me, and then people are even higher than you.
Yeah.
Like there's, I guess you could say I probably am in the 1% for how much money I spend, but like I've also, I mean, this might be a response bias or whatever, but there's been a lot of people that post on or have posted on like Reddit that open like for especially several sets, like thousands of dollars worth of just one set, like Evolving Skies. People have done that,
Yeah.
but it's like $2,000 they might open. That's the value before they open. The value after they open, maybe a quarter of that. you know.
Well, something does happen too. Like when you start spending more money, like you kind of become numb to it. I think this was brought up when you bought the Lorcana set because I think you said something like it's the most I've ever spent on something or this and that.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, once you do it once, the next time is a lot easier. And
The first cut's the deepest, right?
yeah, and it's definitely true. I mean, I I throw around $1,000 like nothing sometimes, just knowing the hobby and stuff like that. Had some random person last summer, contact me about Skyridge Charizard that I have now. Just bought that for $1,000 on the spot. It's like, okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a long way to go, and I just remember all that because I remember when I was in the hobby, like looking at these gold stars. I mean, the most expensive one, it was still the Umbreon Espeon, but at the time they were like $200 each raw. Um, checking that old sub I had, I got a 9 Umbreon and an 8 Espeon, and I think I sold them both together for like $600 as a pair. So yeah, they had to only be 100 or 200 raw, but it's like I saw those cards and I saw the gold star cards and I just thought to myself, I'm never going to be able to buy all these cards. And slowly but surely, you get them. And then I thought that about the crystal cards. Like I didn't collect the crystal cards at E Series because I was like, there's just no way I'm going to afford the crystal cards. And sure enough, got those too. So it's like way different perspective. Like when you first enter the hobby, like you just think everything's expensive, and you really do have to do the deep dive to start becoming numb to it. But
And you could have people that spread to the Lost Era or other earlier eras than the one that we're in right now. And you'll have some people, and I believe places already have. That's why some of these cards have stayed up even after the hype. Like your Shadowless that you sold, what was it in PSA 9? They've doubled or three times their value in some cases, and
yeah,
it's not even like the high end Shadowless. Well, I guess one with the Alakazam, but it's still not like the highest card in the set.
yeah,
And obviously the Charizard and the big three are even more than that, but still.
yep, it's wild, and it just goes back to all our factors. I mean, you really gotta look at what you're doing, and you almost have to have that surface level knowledge now to even know which direction to go to. But yeah, I hope just our talk helped you a little bit anyway. Kind of all over the place like we do, but that's kind of our thoughts on it. But I guess we should hop on over to the question and wrap this thing up, don't you say?
Yeah, the only thing I could say is just for the mentor aspect, usually mentor will do better, or almost always mentor will do better. I think it's really the only difference is if you approach a collector who just wants to have it. But if you're the collector that has the money, you're going to go for the best condition possible. That's almost universal as a collector.
Yeah, that's really the only one that's like true no matter what situation. Like
Hmm.
that is just how far are you willing to go. Yeah,
Yeah,
obviously the mentor is going to be better. It's going to be better looking, better, easier to sell, better value when selling, better all
and
around.
that's
But
the only one that's really completely tied to a fiscal value. I feel like, or
yeah,
because that one is like usually yes, but sometimes you can't get the most mint based on your budget.
yeah.
So,
I'd only say it wouldn't be the case if like, it's literally how far do you want to go? Like, yeah,
hmm
mentor's always better across the board with all factors. But like, if you just want the card because you like it, you don't really care about the super perfect condition, maybe it's not better. 'Cause maybe you could use that money to buy more cards,
hmm
buy more cards with that money or buy better goals. So, yeah, it's not always better based on your situation, but it's not one to worry about.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I guess moving on to the questions, you had a good question about the grading companies, which we can wrap back into the conversation from the
Yep.
intro.
And my question is, originally it was worded before I heard the numbers. It was worded, has CGC passed BGS within the hobby as the clear number two preferred grader? And now you can almost argue how relevant is BGS even at this point? I mean, it's still relevant, right? But like, it no longer is the power that it used to be within the hobby for the most part.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
Yeah, I think if it wasn't for the black label and some sports card support, I think BGS would really be struggling. They're doing okay. I mean, yeah, they're kind of struggling. They could be doing a lot better, but I mean, I think they're doing pretty well. But yeah,
Sports is keeping them alive.
I think CGC, like for Pokemon, no doubt, CGC is number two, no matter what. They offer a good service. It's mostly Pokemon focused, and it was mostly direct relation to like the void in the market when PSA closed. Sports cards, I mean, I would not send any sports cards to CGC. There, I would only stick with SGC, maybe, BGS, maybe, but definitely PSA. Same with
Yeah,
Pokemon. I mean, you could go kind of anywhere with Pokemon, but I mean, pretty much just want to be PSA or CGC. But I think they
unless you think
have,
it's a perfect card.
yeah, I think they have, yeah, past BGS and SGC for sure. Yeah, the only situation would be like if you're trying to chase a black label, because black labels are pretty cool.
Yeah.
They look nice and all that, but super hard to get, obviously, and it's unique to Beckett, and it's Beckett's thing. So, out of all the grading companies, they do it best when it's like depicting a perfect card. CGC has their perfect 10, and they show you like 10, 10, 10, 10. But it looks like their normal label. It's just labeled in yellow writing, which I like less than the normal way.
Well,
So,
yeah. They don't try hard. Like for how hard they made it when they first started grading, it was kind of a slap in the face. Like, okay, here's our 10. It's the changing of the color, and that's pretty much it. I would have been more impressed with like a gold label or something along the lines of that strategy. I know they don't have to like copy one for one, but they can have like a variant that's equal in collector interest, but they
well,
didn't.
it's literally
And it's
like
something,
yellow font, yellow writing. Like,
yeah,
make the yellow like you can make that gold or make that hollow, like
or
a
something,
shiny gold. Yeah,
yeah,
just it
some
looks
sort of
worse than the normal label.
And I think CGC kind of, because of its history with comics, and it believes that they are established and in other areas in the collectible industry, and they believe now they're just as equal to PSA. And in a lot of ways, I would say they're probably right. Not all one for one, but it's pretty close. And I mean, them having that mindset, you got to believe. Like, I
Yeah.
don't have issues with them believing that mindset. What I do have issues is that they don't feel like they need to change anything. In some ways, that's kind of PSA too, because I think PSA is really missing out not having some sort of perfect label distinction.
Hmm. It's
Have
been tossed
10, but
around like if PSA should do subgrades, but I don't know. People are just so set. I mean, there's not the only bad thing about PSA. There's not a whole lot of room on the slab label. I mean,
yeah,
some of the cards, the way they abbreviate things and type it all out. I mean, it's already pretty busy already.
yeah.
But maybe they could put it on the back or something, or maybe they could, even if they gave you like an insert that was like a certified business card of that cert number, and like, you know, just a more in-depth grading service. I mean, that'd be cool.
I think it would be some sort of foil. Like, you don't have to change too much. You can make it like a chrome or like a platinum
Or
foil
or like a
with
little
like
like maybe like a 10 plus. Give it like a little like plus or a little symbol on the thing.
something, or something that distincts it as being perfect, or like being in the top 25% or something. I don't know. They are both missing that, and I think that's something that we will see, because one thing that competition is good for the consumer, and in this case, it's collectors. So I hope CGC would definitely do something. I definitely want to see them do something. PSA, I would, with how grading is the new norm, and everybody's grading modern. I would like to see a distinction with how many tens that they're handing out. Like, what is
Yeah.
it? Like, probably 10% or so on average, maybe. It's more than that. It's more than that. I don't know how many tens that they're getting, but it's significant. And I believe in the grade for the most part. Sometimes there's inconsistencies, which I don't agree with. But there's different levels of 10. And since you don't have a 9.5 to show some of that variation and diffusion of like the stats, I think you should go upwards. Still have your customers happy, but you can even go further to make your customers not need to choose really CGC or BGS.
Hmm.
But it's something they haven't done yet, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. It's a weird one. My question was, given the prices of PSA coming down and they continue to go down, like where do you think CGC's place will be in the future? Like, I mean, it seems like right now it's pretty much $15 at CGC, $15 at PSA with the latest special. CGC was asked if they were going to adjust their market because, PSA is obviously selling for more than CGC. I mean, even the 9.5s to the PSA 10s, I mean, just do way better. Even though 9 times out of 10 you can crack out some of those 9.5s and they become PSA 10s. There's a lot of people making plays like that right now and doing well. It's it's a weird time, but with the prices being the same or like near each other, CGC says their service and pricing is fine because of their turnaround times, which they do have better turnaround times, but it's essentially saying they're not going to change the pricing. So if this continues where they're close, where do you see CGC like fitting in the future?
Well, I still think they are cheaper than BGS. So, and I think because of the amount of people that came into the hobby during the 2020 hype, and how many people end up either willingly or unwillingly, I guess you can say, going to CGC, and a lot of those individuals being satisfied with CGC. Although I admit the first big issue was how hard tens were. A lot of people were satisfied in just getting their cards rated and being able to sell them. And you have to wonder how many of those people will be loyal to CGC and how many of them would go to PSA. I also have to wonder how many people that had cards at PSA and it took a long time, how many of those people have taken it personally and have hated PSA because of it. There's a lot of factors that can be played why people would become loyal to CGC, and with how large of a percentage, like we mentioned before in this episode, that the new people take up in this hobby, you have to wonder if basically them alone will keep CGC and lift it to be the number two. Because right now it's kind of a muddied waters with who's number two. There's a clear one, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at currently, and
it's like sports and TCG related. Like if you're only talking sports, like I think CGC would be last because it directly connected to the Pokemon collectors, and I think that's kind of where you're seeing SGC kind of creep in because it was pretty much solely sports, just like BGS was, but the people creeping into Pokemon using those companies are more likely to go with SGC rather than BGS because, I mean, for the longest time, it was just a pain just to submit to BGS. It's a little better now with their new system, and I think sometime early this year they hinted at a new slab, and people thought it was a joke because they basically essentially made it a joke because not everyone liked it. So it's like, here's our new slab. Oh, you don't like it? Well, we were just kidding. That wasn't really it. Like, I think they need to do something, but I
them
don't know.
changing. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm saying in terms of the competition is good for as a collector because we're getting variety, and I think you'll also see because of this new price point with PSA. I think you'll see CGC use that as potential another variety. I think we're going to kind of see a little bit of variety, and unfortunately, well, I mean, I could see even PSA adopting some of these features to keep people going to them as well, whatever they may be. Maybe it is what we want, and the 10 with like the foil or something, or even maybe subgrades on the back. However, I feel like a lot of collectors would want subgrades on the front, but they could go that route. But I think the biggest thing is just the 10. Like I said, the perfect 10 variation would pretty much seal the deal for me as a PSA guy. I mean,
Yeah.
more or less.
I like subgrades too. I wish CGC would just automatically put subgrades on there. I don't know why, but it's like pretty much like 90% of the people I talk to that do use CGC or do like it to some extent don't like subgrades. They don't like paying for them. They don't really care for them. I like the cards I have in CGC. I collect 9.5s on some certain cards. I only collect them with the subgrades on there just because it's more information. It tells you more about the card. It's cool like seeing exactly what they think is wrong with the card. I would hate to have a card and like just kind of guess why it's like that. With PSA, with their single grading scale, they don't really have the 0.5 grading scale, so it's a little easier to like guess and know what's what. But I don't know. I just like the subgrades. That's one thing I do like with CGC. And then I really like their case. I really like the way.
It feels good in your hand. I'll say that
Yeah.
because it's rounded, so it's just easier to hold in your hand as well. It seems like.
Yeah. And BGS cases, I mean, they're thick, and they're okay. The problem with it is, people typically send higher end condition cards to BGS because you want that 9.5. Historically, it's been pretty rare to get 9.5, and people respect that. But like the different colored labels when you get down to the lower grades, I mean, I don't like that. I think the 8 is like silver or white. It's just, I don't know, inconsistency. But it is what it is. I don't use BGS at all, so take that with a grain of salt. I might be kind of biased, but it's only PSA and CGC for me. I think CGC will always have a place. I think they do need to adjust some stuff to get with the times, but I think over time, those times will change. Like, I think they'll get a little more respect for their 9.5, like we talked about a long time ago. It'll slowly get more respect for what it is as BGS fades out, unless they do something different. So yeah, it'll always have its respectable place, I think.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of cards created also from the modern era that are now with CGC, and with BGS now being more expensive for their economy tier, it's less reason for people to send to BGS.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder how many people, as I mentioned, are set in their ways. But also, as collectors, how much of this arrow is already CGC, and how little of it is BGS. Collectors
Yeah,
like
there's not much.
collectors like uniformity, and I think that's going to be a big problem for BGS down the line. A very big problem.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem with CGC already. I mean, now that PSA is so low, it's like, well, I mean, if they're the same price and you don't mind waiting, I mean, you're only sending in to CGC rather than PSA because you like CGC more. But there's not really many people who like CGC more, especially if they're resellers, because you get more bang for your buck in PSA.
And a
So
lot of shops, some shops accept non-PSA, some shops only deal with PSA. So
yeah, so it's got me thinking. It's like, well, do I crack out all these 9.5s of CGC? Because I mean, is it worth it? But I'm just gonna stick to it and just see how it plays out. I buy higher in 9.5s. It works out for me right now because, I mean, you're paying super cheap prices. And it could potentially pay off in the future if I crack these out and create them as 10s too. So I think it's a safe play, but you really got to, only collect what you like for what it is if you're dealing with CGC right now.
because the cost of grading and fees involved, you could potentially only be breaking even too.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the case I was in the Marnie from the Shiny Star V. I thought it was a perfect card, ended up being, like, what was it, two 9.5s, two 10s, and yeah. And, I probably lost like $200, but at the time of PSA, with how expensive it was to ship it off, to be regraded, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. So, it might pay off. It probably will pay off. But you might not be able to have it pay off immediately. It might take a little bit of time.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking about getting that card. Be CGC 9.5.
The Marnie from the Shiny Star V.
Yeah. Looks like it's about 300, yeah. 350 right now.
Hey, I sold it for over 5. No, I think it was. No, 700 is what it was. So yeah, it came down big time.
Yeah.
But it would have been like 1,000 if I got PSA 10 or something like that. So.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I guess that'll about wrap it up for this one. Still hit about the 2-hour mark.
Yeah. we're getting a little tired. You can kind of feel it, I think, from both of us.
Yeah.
Try to maintain high energy, but hopefully we don't bore y'all. And if we do, well, we'll make sure to get a good night's sleep next time.
All right, guys. Not sure what the next topic will be, but we will see you then.
Y'all have a good one. Until next time.